Alright, so I want to talk about motivation and what drives people to succeed and what drives people to only get the bare minimum out of life. And I think the most important thing about motivation is that as long as it comes from an external source, you will always rely on someone else to get your job done. And the weird thing about motivation is that you can only really exceed when there's something that drives you inwardly instead of externally. And you get enjoyment out of the act of doing something. So here's my take on motivation, and I really think that anyone struggling to get motivation in life should take this on board and really let it sink in for a few minutes. And what I'm getting at is motivation should not be the end goal. Motivation should really be the process of doing something, and then the end goal really a stepping stone towards a greater achievement. Because throughout life, the most important thing you can always do is work towards getting the process, the enjoyment of doing towards something bigger. And what I really mean by this is that motivation comes in waves if you're always working towards something. But if you're in love with the process of doing that something, then every single day is a good day, because every single day that you work towards it and build yourself up and get better with what you're doing, you will always work better, more efficiently and more effectively. And what I find interesting about this is that the act of motivation comes to those willing to not accept the final goal. Let's say you start your day with a list of to-dos, and on that to-do list you have clean the house, go for a run, do the shopping. What really clarifies where you get motivation is not the act of crossing the list, but the act of doing what's on the list. You can write whatever you want on a to-do list. My advice is don't write a lot of things. If you want to get something really important done, let's say you had 2 hours in a day to get anything done, 2 whole hours. Let's say you had a stroke, you could not do anything else. You had 2 hours a day that you had enough energy to be able to do something. And during those 2 hours is really where you get the most out of your day. During those 2 hours, you really need to be able to accept, grow, and initialize something much better than what you're already doing. What's really interesting about this is that motivation then becomes the act of finding out ways to get things done. An unraveling of creative direction, or in better terms, figuring out what drives you to do the driving. It kind of sounds like a double entendre, because how can you do something for the sake of doing it when you get no reward out of it? And I think this is the biggest stumble and stepping stone most people have to get over before they actually reach higher states of motivation and higher states of contentment and happiness in their life, is that when you actually get things done for the sake of doing them instead of the sake of the final goal, anything becomes a challenge of how well you can do the doing, or how well you can do the process. Because that's really where the greatness in life comes from. The people who aren't afraid to do the process as they work towards something better. Because so long as you're always in love with the process, you never actually fail. Because so long as you're doing more, you're never gonna stumble, you're never gonna fail. Because even if you're cut down at your peak, it then becomes the process of outdoing what you've already done.